Have you ever correctly had a gut feeling to dislike someone who, on the surface, seemed like a cool person that everybody else liked? What's that story? So, my husband has this cousin, Jason. And he f***ing loathes him. Always has, ever since they were kids. There are stories about my husband trying to beat Jason's ass when they were 5. It was so bad that, as an adult, my husband refused to attend any family gatherings where Jason would be, out of fear he'd beat the living shit out of him. Nobody could ever figure out why my husband hated Jason so much. Jason had never done anything specific to him. My husband is the most laid-back and friendly person I've ever met. He genuinely likes everyone. Except for this motherfucker. I never understood it myself, never having met Jason, and anytime I asked my husband about it, he'd just say, "I fucking hate that kid." He's not right. Jason was pretty well liked throughout the family, so my husband's position caused him to catch a lot of shit from other family members. I finally got to meet Jason a few years ago at my brother-in-law's wedding. And I saw right fucking off what my husband was talking about. To the casual observer, there was nothing tangible that Jason did that you could point to. But something was just off. He would laugh and smile, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were flat and empty, unless he was looking at the girls at the wedding. And by girls, I mean children under 10. When Jason looked at those little girls, his eyes lit up with this sick little light. You know how someone who hasn't eaten in a long time looks when their favorite meal is finally set in front of them? That's how Jason's eyes looked when he looked at those girls, like he was hungry, and they were his meal. About 2 years ago, Jason's dad married a woman with 2 young daughters. Jason often volunteered to babysit. About a year ago, Jason was arrested and convicted. You can probably imagine what he did to the girls to end up being convicted. My grandfather's second wife, his first wife, my grandmother, passed away in the late 80s before I was born, was something else. She came onto the scene in the late 90s. She was about 10 or 15 years younger than him, and the whole family was happy that he was dating again and had found someone to make him happy. But to me, she seemed really phony. Fake smile, dead eyes, and a little too nice, like she was trying way too hard. They quickly got married, and she encouraged him to buy a condominium with his money. Then things started to get weird. She began isolating him, turning my grandfather against the whole family Grima Wormtongue style. She told him things like my dad, his son, never loved him, my aunts didn't care about him, and that his kids were selfish, terrible people who resented him for not visiting enough. He started believing her. He grew bitter, then angry, and eventually disowned my father and my aunts. She even had his will changed so she was the sole inheritor of all his money. She prevented any contact and threatened to call the police if we tried reaching out. On top of that, she started sending insane, handwritten letters to my dad. They'd be 10 to 20 pages long, full of veiled threats about my sister and me. Things like, "You love your children, don't you, Frank? Wouldn't it be terrible if something happened to them, Frank? You better keep a close eye on them, because they might be harmed." My dad was worried, so he hired a private investigator to look into her. Turns out, she was a retired nurse who'd done this to 3 other men before my grandfather. She'd swoop in, marry them quickly, isolate them from their families, wait for them to die, collect the inheritance, and then move on to her next target. There was also speculation that she might have been tampering with his medication. Being a retired nurse, she'd know exactly what to do to help, or harm, him. My grandfather ended up passing away very suddenly and strangely from an aortic rupture, and we've always wondered if she played a role in it. At the funeral, she caused a huge scene, trying to bar my family from attending. Afterward, she disappeared into the sunset with his money, and we never saw her again. I babysit for my sister all the time when she wants to get away from the crazy people. A few years back, maybe 2 or 3, my sister had a boyfriend named G. He seemed cool, but I did not like him at all. I just felt like he wasn't the right one for my sister. Her kids liked him, so I tried to be nice. Maybe it was just my anxiety. The first red flag came when they went to a party. The place where my sister lives is like a small community, so they just walked down the street. When my sister and G came back, I was sitting on the round couch in front of the door with my youngest nephew, trying to put him to sleep. G might have been drunk, but he started talking to some people they were with and making fun of me. I was about 14 at the time, so it just made me feel awful. I didn't have the courage to yell at him, so I ignored it. The second red flag was when I found out he smoked weed. My sister had quit because of her and her kids' health problems, but G was out here, selling a ridiculous amount of weed. I didn't know if my sister knew, but I overheard him while I was pretending to sleep on the round couch in front of the door. At that point, I knew this guy was bad news, so I started trying to get my nieces and nephews to come to my place instead of me going to my sister's house to watch them. I just didn't trust G. A few months later, my mom told me that G had taken my sister's gun, which she legally owns, and robbed a gas station down the street. He got her gun confiscated, almost got her kids taken away, and nearly got her kicked out of her place. She dumped him, and now she's dating a much nicer guy who's way better than shitty G. My mom started dating someone, let's call him Andrew, when I was about 6 or 7. I don't remember the first time I met him or feeling an overwhelming hatred, but I just didn't like him. My mom didn't date much, but my dad had remarried years before, so I figured maybe it was just me adjusting to the idea. She really seemed to like him and said she had known him for a few years already. My sister didn't like him either, but she was around when my parents divorced, so I thought maybe it had something to do with that. We hung out with him a few times as a group, but then, all of a sudden, they stopped dating. My mom seemed fine, and less than a year later, she started dating someone new, a guy I really liked. Fast forward 3 or so years, and that relationship ended. My mom then started things back up with Andrew, and I was very disappointed. She also announced that he'd be joining us on our spring break trip. Not much happened on the trip, and my sister and I managed to tolerate his presence, except for the very unfortunate incident where I walked in on them, forever scarred, but let's move on. Eventually, the same thing happened, suddenly, no more Andrew. By this time, I was older, and my mom was a very open parent, so my sister and I got the details. Apparently, Andrew was still married to the woman he referred to as his ex-wife, and was taking frequent trips to the state she lived in to see her and their daughter. Turns out, he had been doing this the first time he and my mom were together, too. Even now, I feel like there's more to the story because his whole persona was just so off. He was one of those classic messed up weirdos who disguise themselves as fun, chill guys. Anyway, screw you, Andrew. My first grade teacher. He was paralyzed from the waist down but was extremely functional. Everyone thought it was amazing that he was pursuing his passion for teaching, and he was relatively personable and funny. I always got weird vibes from him, but my parents attributed it to me being young and weirded out by his disability. He was a bit eccentric, to be fair, but nothing creepy. His house was full of exotic reptiles, scorpions, tarantulas/spiders, and insects that he bred, and he'd bring them to class from time to time for show and tell. For a bunch of 6-year-olds, that's pretty entertaining. He had a daughter who was a few years older than me and would always show us pictures of her. His wife had died when the daughter was quite young, and she was all he had left. One day during recess, I found a ladybug, which I enthusiastically brought to show said teacher, knowing he liked insects. He smiled at me and asked me to put it on his tongue. Not wanting to disobey my teacher despite this seeming odd, strict Catholic school does that to you, I did as he asked. He licked my finger and then swallowed the ladybug, saying it was delicious. That was a major, what the heck, moment, and I avoided being alone with him for the final month of school. The next fall, he did not return. Rumors began circulating that he'd had an accident or medical complications. Nope. He was arrested for abusing his daughter, saying she reminded him so much of his wife. I only found out the truth many years later because no one wanted to explain that to a bunch of little kids. Needless to say, I was not shocked. Dude was always creepy, and especially after the ladybug incident, I just knew he was a freaking weirdo. Yes, I always listen to that gut feeling now, and I wish it hadn't taken me so long to learn to follow it. My dog is the best judge of character I know. I don't care who you are, if my dog doesn't like you, fuck off. A few years back, when I first got my dog, he wouldn't show the slightest bit of aggression to anyone, until my so-called best friend came over. He would not stop barking at him. Every single time that friend came by, the barking started. I could have a party with 30 people, and my dog wouldn't bat an eye, but the second that one friend showed up, it was non-stop barking. I didn't understand it at first. We'd been friends for 20 years, we were diaper buddies. But then I found out the truth. He robbed my house, knowing when I'd be out of town, and had been stealing from me for years. An Xbox game here, something else there, just random things I thought I'd lost over time. I finally called a pawn shop pretending to be him and found out he'd pawned hundreds of dollars worth of my stuff. As if that wasn't enough, I also found out he'd been trying to sleep with my wife, the mother of my children. A lifelong friendship, gone. We were like brothers, and he ruined it. Now, my dog is my best friend. In 8 years, the shadiest thing he's done is steal my dinner off the counter and then throw it up in my bed while I was in it. He's the only friend I have who can pull that shit and not get fucked up. Man's best friend, right? I worked at a children's attraction. Part of my job was to provide training for employees, though I wasn't their manager. One guy, probably around 20, stood out to me because he kept asking weird questions, like, what would happen if I stole a juice box? Something about him just felt off. After the training, I mentioned to his managers that something seemed wrong with him and suggested they keep an eye on him. Instead of taking me seriously, they told me to mind my own business. It even got me in trouble with a company VP for telling them how to do their job. A month or two later, they had to fire him, and a female employee, after he convinced her to be intimate with him in a supply closet, maybe 10 feet from guests, while we were open. When they confronted him, they lied and told him they had caught him on camera. In reality, it was a coworker who reported him to the manager. His response? He asked which girl they had video of. Turns out, he had been being intimate with multiple girls in the closet while we were open. But apparently, I need to mind my own business. My mom dated a string of jerks. My asshole radar has been working great since I was about 9 years old. 2 of them stand out most in my memory. The first guy magically seemed to have all the same hobbies and interests as she did. When she mentioned liking antiques, wouldn't you know it, he had a property way out in the boonies full of his antique collection. Over and over, he'd come up with things like this. She thought it was amazing how well they matched, but I thought he was full of crap. A year went by, and he'd convinced her of all sorts of nonsense. She even bought her own engagement ring because of some excuse like all his money is tied up in his antique business. Then, one day, everything came crashing down. She found out he was a grade-A conman, the kind of guy you'd see as a guest on a daytime talk show. He had multiple girlfriends, was stealing money from all of them, didn't have 2 red cents to his name, and was a complete fraud. I tried to tell her from the first time I met him, but she wouldn't listen. Then there was Crazy Bob. I was about 12 when she dated him. He was hyper and tried way too hard to get us to like him. He'd shower my mom with gifts and got annoyed that we saw right through him. To make a long story short, he snapped. His family knew he was seriously mentally ill but never warned her. One day, in the mood, he broke into her place, slashed up all her clothes with scissors, slashed her car tires, and started stalking her. His family apologized after the fact, but that didn't help much. I always hated his beady eyes and knew from the start there was something seriously off about him. City council hired another medic. Older guy with long hair, not that it matters. He had recently completed his training and was new to the field. At first, he seemed great to hang out with. He'd go to the bar with the younger EMTs, play video games, and was generally well liked. But as I observed his work, I was his superior and responsible for his probationary evaluation, I started noticing something was off. At his 30-day review during a private council meeting, I spoke openly about my concerns. I told them that something didn't feel right. He didn't seem like a people person and didn't have the natural empathy that fits the role. I explained that, in this field, being a people person is almost an unwritten rule. Doing the job without that care can lead to mistakes, and in our field, mistakes mean death. The council pushed back, saying I had no grounds to claim he wasn't suited for the role because he was doing the job as described. I countered, explaining that in this line of work, reading people and understanding them is critical. They brushed me off, claiming I was jealous because he got along so well with the EMTs. Honestly, I couldn't have cared less. I'm not in this job for popularity. Fast forward a month, and I get a call from an ER about an hour away. A doctor explained that a patient report stated the administration of 80 milligrams of a certain drug. However, the patient denied receiving it. The situation didn't make sense, so the ER ran a tox screen, which confirmed the patient hadn't been given the drug. The doctor felt something was off and decided to notify me. After thanking him, I reviewed the trip sheet, which showed the drug, dosage, and time administered. I checked the narcotics log, which confirmed the drug had been given and replenished with the correct tag numbers. Then I called a local police officer friend. Together, we inspected the medic's narcotics box. Sure enough, it had been tampered with and replenished. We went through his logs for the past 2 months and found at least 12 incidents where drugs were documented as administered but were likely unnecessary. I called the ER doctor back, explained the situation, and he offered his full support, providing a written statement, test results, and promising to check records of other patients this medic had treated. Next, my buddy called dispatch and had the council members come to the station, citing an emergency. When they arrived, we laid out all the evidence. Within 15 minutes, we had DA approval and a judge's signature for an arrest warrant. The medic later confessed to having a 20-year painkiller addiction. He had run out of sources and thought becoming a medic would give him easy access. He even admitted to the judge that he worried he might have killed someone just to get the meds. At his trial, I was asked for a recommendation. I told the judge I'd seen how addiction changes people and didn't hold him fully responsible. On my recommendation, he received 3 months in a locked drug rehab facility, followed by 6 months of house arrest. 4 years later, the guy is clean. He now runs a fundraiser to provide anonymous Narcan services and drug awareness programs. Today, he'd be an honored member of my crew. Addiction literally changes people. The end result? I now have sole responsibility for hiring, reviewing, and dismissing medics. I no longer need to justify to the council why someone is let go. In this job, a gut feeling can decide someone's fate. Interviewing a guy for a job. Something didn't feel right, but my interviewing partner really seemed to like him. We got to his portfolio of work, and I noticed one of the websites was my side project, something I worked on alone. I decided to dig deeper, asking him questions about it. What challenges did he face? How was the client? He went on, making up a whole story. Finally, I said, I have to level with you. This is my work. You're showing me my own work. Look at the source near the footer, it has my website in the comments. He went ghost white, and I just sat there. Afterward, I coached him a little on how not to screw up this badly, and he left. We called the contract agency that sent him and let them know what happened. Generally, I don't get along with women. I'm the oldest of 7 brothers, was in the military, and have always worked in very male-dominated environments. I've been in a long-term relationship for years and am a relationship-only kind of girl. Most of my friends are men. In 2008, I married my best friend. We met at work and had no sexual connection at all for 3 years. Somehow, we began dating and eventually got married. He and I were so close and had the best relationship. Over time, we started hanging out with my other best friend, a male coworker, Ted, from my department. Ted began dating our lieutenant's niece, Danielle. Danielle was gorgeous, a Jessica Biel lookalike with an amazing body. She was outgoing and affectionate, and everyone loved her. People worshipped her, wanting to be around her all the time. We became close over time, and she became my one and only female best friend. Every weekend, we got together at our house, took vacations as a foursome, and texted daily. Ted and I worked every shift together and took the same assignments. We were close. One night, Danielle came over to hang out while Ted had separate plans. We drank, and I ended up going to bed around 2 a.m. The next morning, I woke up with an unmistakable feeling that something was terribly wrong. I went downstairs, and Danielle was making breakfast, smoking with my husband, and overly excited to see me. She left later, and my husband began acting distant. I knew something wasn't right and suspected it had to do with her. Later that week, my husband announced that he and Danielle were going skydiving together, and our planned camping trip as a foursome no longer included me. Pictures started popping up on Facebook of their activities together, but no one else seemed to find it odd. I repeatedly asked both of them if anything was going on, but they called me crazy. That weekend, my husband left without me for the camping trip with Danielle, Ted, and a group of mutual friends. I couldn't stand the thought of them being alone, so I drove 3 hours by myself to the campsite. When I arrived, I was met with cold shoulders and mean looks. Everyone was fawning over Danielle, gushing about how amazing, beautiful, and funny she was. No one seemed to notice how upset I was, not even Ted. That night, my husband didn't come back to our tent. Unable to sleep, I got up at 4 a.m., found his phone charging in the car, and managed to unlock it. What I found destroyed me. Nude pictures of Danielle, explicit texts, and a video of her and my husband in an intimate act. I still regret not sending those to myself. I confronted her right then, and she ripped my head off. Everyone else sided with her, calling me jealous and narcissistic. I left the campsite alone, in tears. The following week, I told Ted what I had found. He became enraged and accused me of being jealous, trying to ruin Danielle's relationship, and being evil. He told me to never speak to him or her again. My husband then called me, said I was crazy, and told me he wanted a divorce for causing drama and coming between him and work. I felt like I was back in high school. Long story short, my husband left me in a nasty divorce and secretly dated Danielle for 3 years while she was still with Ted. I lost all my friends at work and ended up on bad terms with admin for a while. After I left the department, Ted eventually found out about the relationship and tried to kill my ex-husband. Everyone finally realized their darling Danielle was a tramp, but no one apologized or said, "Damn, you were right." Today, my ex still dates women 20 years his junior. Danielle is a raging alcoholic who's never worked and still lives at home. I haven't talked to Ted since. My brother's youth soccer coach. He was a great coach who really knew how to win. Everybody liked the guy, including my whole family and me. I was only 8 to 12 when I knew him, but he was very kind to me and would even let me practice with the team, even though I was 4 years younger. At the time, we had an old golden retriever who did nothing but sleep, eat, and take the occasional walk around the living room for a good back scratch. I'd grown up with him since he was a pup, and I had never seen him be aggressive toward anyone or any other animals, except maybe a few squirrels when he was younger. One day, the soccer coach came over to our house to chat with my dad, who was an assistant coach, and my brother about an upcoming tournament. As soon as he walked in the door, our old golden went ballistic. I had never seen him act this way. We had to hold him back to stop him from going full Cujo on the guy. The coach never entered our house because of him. A year later, that man was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree premeditated murder of his wife. It could have been an odd coincidence, but I like to think our old pup was protecting us from a very bad man, someone we couldn't see for who he really was. R.I.P. Red Wing. About 15 years ago, I worked in a small office, mostly with men I really liked. One day, a new guy started, and instantly I got a bad feeling about him. I couldn't pinpoint exactly why, and everyone else seemed fine with him, so I tried my best to be polite and find things to talk about. I was in my mid-30s, and he was around the same age or a little older. We both had young sons, so we were able to find some common ground. He mentioned that he and his wife didn't live together, she might have been back in his home country. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the bad feeling. A year or so later, I had left the company to have my second son. One morning, a friend who had taken my place at the office called me and said, "Did you read the paper today? That man had been arrested in another state in an FBI sting. He had been chatting online with someone he thought was a 13-year-old girl and went to meet her. When they searched his car, they found a video camera and rope in the trunk." I worked as a CNA in a nursing home during and right after high school. We got a new guy who made a lot of mistakes and clearly had some cognitive impairments. I'm not sure what was wrong exactly, but it was obvious that he was mentally slow. Some of his mistakes were dangerous, for example, leaving a patient with a feeding tube lying flat, which significantly increases the chance of aspirating food into their lungs. On several occasions, I complained about him to our supervisor and vented to my coworkers that I just didn't feel right about him. Everyone accused me of lacking compassion. They said he was slow but would eventually get it and that I should be more understanding. They thought I was being judgmental because of his disability, but to me, it felt like there was more to it. One night, another CNA went to answer a call light and walked in on him inappropriately touching an elderly, bedridden woman. He didn't even stop, just held eye contact with the coworker until he was finished. This all happened over 15 years ago. He went to jail, obviously, but I saw him at Walmart last summer, so he's out now. I really hope he's never able to work in a position where he can take advantage of vulnerable people again. I had, for many years, a close friend I'll call B. We stayed friends largely because we were among the few survivors of our punk rock clique from high school. Most of our mutual friends had either done serious jail time, gone to rehab, or had died, either by murder or overdose. For a while, that shared history kept us close. Later, I was living in another state but wanted to move back home, so I rented her basement for a year. Over that time, I started noticing things about her that others had already pointed out but that I had ignored because of our history. I had friends who outright told me, I don't like her, and I don't know why. That started to stick with me, and I began to notice things myself. For one, she had absolutely zero empathy for anyone. Anytime we passed a homeless person, she'd make cracks like, he probably makes more money than you do. She always put herself first. Every decision or angle benefited her in some way. She also became increasingly conspiratorial as she got older and was terribly misinformed about nearly everything. She got all her facts from talk radio and absorbed it unquestioningly. But the real kicker happened during a road trip. We were going out of state to see a band we both loved. It was an 8-hour drive, so we had to get up really early. The night before, I had a strange nightmare that she had bodies buried in her backyard. In the dream, she had killed 3 people and wanted my help burying them. I woke up feeling deeply unsettled but didn't mention it. During the drive, completely out of the blue, she started talking about killing people. She asked me, would you ever commit murder? I gave the stock answer, only in self-defense or to protect my family. Then she clarified, no, I mean for fun. I froze and looked at her. What do you mean, for fun? I asked. She replied, I think it would be fun. I'd do it if I knew I could get away with it. That was the moment I knew something was deeply wrong. I started pulling away from her after that, and a few months later, I moved out. I haven't spoken to her since. To this day, I have a gut feeling that someday, something's going to come out about her. She's clearly a sociopath, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's already done something terrible. It was a coworker of mine, let's call her M. M was friendly, and everyone seemed to like her. But something was off, and I had a bad vibe. She was always complaining about money problems, yet she'd go out for meals or come into work with new clothes, things that didn't match the story of someone struggling to make ends meet. She claimed she was so desperate she could barely put food on the table for her kids. Everyone else sympathized with her. I didn't. Something about her seemed constantly deceptive. People at work would go out of their way to help her, giving her Target gift cards, clothes, or canned food. She also complained of car issues for months. One particularly kind coworker, C, would let M borrow her car during the workday so M could supposedly go buy food for her family or even take naps because she said she worked an evening job and was often exhausted. Every year, our company sponsored a family in need during Christmas. We were a small business with fewer than 50 employees, and we'd donate toys, clothes, and gift cards to help. That year, to my silent opposition, the team decided M would be our family. We gathered nearly $1,100 worth of food, toys, and clothes for her and presented it to her before Christmas. She cried and thanked everyone profusely. 3 months later, C's car was stolen right out of the employee parking lot. Coincidentally, M didn't return to work that afternoon. Long story short, M had made a copy of C's car key at some point, stole the car, and fled the state with no intention of coming back. After C reported the theft, M was eventually arrested during a traffic stop. It turned out M had a long history of financial crimes, specializing in identity theft. She had swindled many people and had a criminal record filled with multiple felonies. From the very beginning, I knew something was wrong with her, even though I couldn't explain why. No one else seemed to notice, and I started questioning myself. Why do I dislike M when everyone else seems to love her? I wrestled with that doubt for a long time, but when the truth came out, I couldn't help but feel vindicated. My gut had been right all along. I know this guy and girl, they used to be a couple. When I first met them, they walked through the door of the pub and sat down. He looked like the typical quarterback, and she looked like a typical prom queen type. Anyway, they got along with everyone. He was super chill and loved gaming. We'd talk about Dark Souls all night. She was super down to earth, really cool, and sweet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he abused her. As soon as I made my first impression, I leaned over to my best friend and said, "I bet he beats her," in a joking kind of way, but it was still my gut feeling. Fast forward 3 years, and they break up. She becomes a regular in our group, and he goes off and does his own thing. One night, we're all drunk and talking about exes and relationships, and I jokingly bring up my initial gut feeling about him. She confirmed that he did hit her, pushed her against walls, yelled at her, the works. Other than that, the guy was a stand-up bloke. Never talked to him after that, though. My sister's first husband. I was 5 when they got married, and I only actually met him a few times in person because they lived on the other side of the country. My family really loved him. He was charming, athletic, smart, handsome, financially secure, and seemed like a great dad when they had kids. Plus, he was never anything but nice to me. But I always sensed something shady about the guy. When I was in the 5th grade, I remember getting into huge trouble for a class assignment, an essay describing our families, in which I described him as a bad person. Pretty much word for word, there's something I just don't like about him. It was one of the only times I got spanked as a child. Fast forward a couple of years, and my parents discovered that he'd been abusive to my sister and the kids almost the entire time. They ended up divorcing, and he has proven to be a complete sociopath ever since. He hasn't paid a dime in child support, despite being well off enough to buy a new luxury sports car every few years, and he uses their 2 kids, now teenagers who know he's full of shit, to play mind games with my sister. For example, he's brought her to court for full custody, knowing he won't win due to his past, just to inconvenience her and rack up her legal fees. He's also refused to let the kids fly out to visit our side of the family a few times for no reason whatsoever. He's an asshole, a narcissist, a complete fucking sociopath, and somehow 10-year-old me was able to sense it before anyone else in my family. When I was 12, there was this girl in our class. She was bubbly and popular, but I always felt like something was off about her. I remember standing by my locker and literally telling my best friend, "I don't trust her. I don't think we should be friends with her." But over time, my best friend did end up befriending her, and as a result, I became friendly with her too. Fast forward to the second half of the following school year, and she had completely manipulated students and teachers alike to dislike me. I was a very shy, easygoing kid at the time, and it absolutely crushed me. I thought I had done something wrong. She did a lot of hurtful things that I won't get into right now. She was a bully, but bullying happens, so I didn't think much of it. My mom eventually had me transferred to another class to get away from the toxic environment. I blocked everyone I knew from that old class, and that was supposed to be the end of it. But it wasn't. Over the next couple of years, she harassed me relentlessly. She would call me using other people's phones, or have them call to harass me about anything and everything. One day, I came home, walked into the living room, and found 2 of her friends sitting there. They had gotten into the house by lying to my parents, claiming they were good friends of mine. They were waiting for me. The craziest part? These 2 girls lived 2 hours away. They had taken a train and traveled 2 hours just to lie their way into my home, all because this girl had convinced them I deserved it. On more than one occasion, I caught her walking past my bedroom window at odd hours. She would just stand there for a while. It was terrifying. Because we were both 14, no one took me seriously. I kept changing my phone number, but somehow, she always found it. Later, I learned she had stalked an ex-boyfriend when she was 16 or 17 and gone hysterical over something bizarre I don't even remember. I'm now 22, and I moved away a couple of years ago. I haven't heard from her since I was 18, but I'm still wary of any of her friends because she's weird. And I fucking knew it. I'll throw in a couple of little wholesome twists to this prompt. Took my baby niece shopping with me one day when she was maybe a little over 1 year old. She's a sweet kid, but not one of those that's overly outgoing. Anyway, we ended up shopping next to a stereotypical biker gang looking guy in his 40s or 50s. He was just minding his own business, but my niece kept eyeballing him and smiling. After a few moments of this, he gave in and kind of showed a sideways grin. When I gave him a friendly smile back, he walked over to us. He started doing sweet baby talk to my niece and proceeded to show me pictures of his grandkids. Sweetest guy ever. My heart melted. I know not to judge a book by its cover from experience, but I absolutely love that little ones don't even have the concept of race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. They just see people. A friend and I had just picked up a box of pizza and stopped to get gas. We live in a town where there's a decent amount of homeless people, so it's not at all uncommon to see or interact with one. We've both had good and bad experiences with them, so neither of us is opposed to helping, but we also don't usually go out of our way to do it. One of the homeless guys was pretty much just doing his own thing but gave us a kind smile as we walked past him. He was clearly homeless but wasn't pushing us for anything. As we were in the car about to leave, my friend said, "That one homeless guy stood out to me for some reason. Do you mind if we give him a slice of pizza?" I told her I thought that was a wonderful idea but was honestly a little apprehensive it might open an uncomfortable door. We pulled up next to him and offered him a slice. He was so happy and asked if he could have two, which we let him. At first, I couldn't decide if I felt like, really? Beggars can't be choosers, dude, or bittersweet that 2 slices were such a luxury. Then he walked over to his homeless friend and gave him the other slice. They both gave us the biggest, genuine grins and waves as we drove away. My heart exploded. She admitted she was a bit skeptical of offering at first, but she said she just had this feeling she'd regret it if she didn't offer him one. It seems like we're born with pretty good instincts about people, both good and bad. These stories just seem to support that we should trust our guts, whether it's that your perfect neighbor is actually a creep, or that the scary, tattooed thug is actually one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. My wife has a friend she grew up with. They were extremely close and knew everything about each other. One day, out of the blue, she told us she was going to visit a friend and his wife on the West Coast, someone she claimed was her best friend in college. We live on the East Coast. My wife talked to her every day during college, and she had never mentioned this guy before. 3 months after her visit, this guy left his wife, filed for divorce, and moved back east to be with my wife's friend. We thought it was a little shady, but we gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was in a horrible marriage or something. We decided to give him a chance. Then we met him. He was way too nice, annoyingly nice. His personality felt like a walking self-help book, full of every cheesy psychological trick used car salesmen use to make people feel comfortable. He gave off a sleazy, fraudulent vibe. My wife and I both felt it immediately. A month after he moved, my wife's friend called to tell her she was moving in with him 2 hours away. My wife gave her sound advice. She reminded her that moving away from family and friends to be with someone she barely knew wasn't a great idea. But her friend insisted they had been best friends in college, so she moved away. We didn't hear from her for a few months. When we finally did, she was elated. Their Facebook statuses were full of cheesy posts about soulmates and love. My wife and I thought maybe we were wrong, maybe he was cheesy, but if he made her happy, that's what mattered. As soon as his divorce was finalized, he proposed, and they got married. Then they moved again, even farther away, for some half-baked job opportunity he had been offered. That's when things started to surface. 2 months into their marriage, he sent a private message to my wife complaining that her friend wasn't living up to the standards he had for her. He wanted tips on how to communicate with her. My wife explained that you marry someone for who they are, not for who you think they'll become. He didn't like that advice. My wife called her friend, read her the email, and asked what the hell was going on. Her friend got pissed that he had reached out to my wife instead of talking to her directly. They had a huge fight, and then he flipped the blame onto my wife, accusing her of meddling and saying they wouldn't have fought if she hadn't shared his email. Real narcissistic stuff. He was already manipulating her perception of reality. Months passed with no communication. My wife, concerned, reached out and arranged a girls' weekend. She drove 3 hours to her friend's house. They had dinner, drank wine, and talked. My wife reiterated exactly what had happened with the email because her friend was starting to see things from his twisted perspective. During dinner, he kept calling obsessively, and she kept sending him to voicemail. After dinner, they went back to her house to spend the night. He was supposed to be out of town but showed up and started screaming at both of them. My wife doesn't take shit, so she gave him a verbal lashing. Her friend kicked him out, and my wife came home. When I found out he had yelled at my wife, I called him and told him that if he ever talked to her like that again, I'd come up there, and it wouldn't be friendly. A few days later, her friend called, screaming, accusing my wife of meddling and saying I had threatened her husband. He had twisted the story again, making us look like the bad guys. Psychological abuse is terrifying because it turns the victim into a shell of who they were. Constant gaslighting makes them feel crazy. My wife never gave up trying to maintain their friendship. They spoke occasionally but never about the relationship. Then her friend's Facebook posts became strange, daily updates about mundane tasks, what time she woke up, what she ate, when she went to work, etc. When my wife asked her about it, she admitted it was because her husband wanted her to be more productive. He felt she wasn't doing enough. She had a full-time job but wasn't allowed to relax at home. She was becoming his obedient servant. When her friend visited us, it always took her about an hour to relax and put her guard down. During one visit, after a few drinks, she told my wife how awful it was to feel forced to have sex every day even when she didn't want to. My wife explained that was rape and that marriage didn't mean she was his sex toy. That conversation empowered her briefly, but as usual, he convinced her that we were meddling, and she pulled away again. We reached out to her family and friends, but he had manipulated everyone into believing he was a great guy. It felt hopeless. One summer, a group of us rented a lake house, including them. We stayed amicable to keep the peace. One afternoon, while we were swimming, she went to shower. He followed her into the house 10 minutes later. When we walked in to grab snacks, we heard him screaming at her for not telling him she was taking a shower. Finally, everyone saw the monster we had seen all along. When he realized he'd been exposed, he made her leave the trip early. After that, his control tightened. No one heard from her anymore. Then, by sheer luck, he upgraded their phones. One day, while cleaning the house, she used the old phone to listen to music and noticed messages dinging. She found out he was texting another woman, sending explicit pictures, and telling her how his wife treated him like garbage and how he was the victim. That was the breaking point. She confronted him, and he blamed her for not giving him enough sex. She finally left him. They divorced, and he's now living with the woman he was messaging, starting the cycle all over again. She's going to therapy to undo the damage he did.